Okay, so let's go back to August 10th, 2019. Jeffrey Epstein is found dead in his jail cell. The official story? Suicide by hanging. But almost immediately, this other story starts to build. A powerful counter-narrative that claims the notorious sex trafficker didn't die at all, that he actually faked his death to escape justice. So today, we're going to dive into the evidence that fuels one of the most persistent conspiracy theories of our time.
So, let's just get right to the heart of it. The big question that kicked this whole thing off. What if the man who knew so many secrets of the rich and powerful is actually still out there? And look, this isn't just some fringe idea from the dark corners of the internet. It's a theory that's built on a whole series of really unsettling questions and inconsistencies that frankly even the biggest skeptics have had a hard time just brushing aside. You know, the very first thing that got people talking, the first seeds of doubt, they were planted by the very first images released to the public. Right away, people started picking apart the photos of the body, and what they claimed to find was pretty startling.
I mean, it took no time at all for this exact comparison to go viral. On the left, you've got a mugshot from 2006. On the right, a photo of his body on a gurney. Conspiracy theorists immediately started pointing to what they saw as huge discrepancies. They zeroed in on the nose, saying it looked wider, less defined, and the ear, which they argued had a completely different shape and lobe structure. The argument was pretty simple. That's just not the same guy.
Now, of course, fact-checkers jumped all over this. They did confirm the photos were authentic, but they also pointed out a really crucial detail. There's a 15-year gap between these two pictures. And, experts pointed out that as we get older, our noses tend to get bigger, and our ears can sag as the skin loses elasticity. So while the features don't perfectly line up, it could just be the natural result of aging, not evidence of some kind of body double.
So just as that whole photo debate was starting to cool down, something else popped up. A much more concrete inconsistency. And this one wasn't about the subtle changes of aging. It was about something that absolutely should have been there, but apparently just wasn't.
So check this out. In the photos of the body, Epstein's left arm is totally bare, but there's a ton of evidence that he had a barbed wire tattoo on that exact bicep. He actually confirmed it himself under oath in a 2017 deposition. We have multiple photos where you can clearly see it, and even a congressman, Thomas Massie, tweeted out images highlighting it. So you gotta ask, where in the world did the tattoo go?
The questions about the body are definitely strange, but look, for a death to be faked, you need more than a look-alike. You need an opportunity, a window. And that's where the story takes a turn. And we look at the catastrophic failures at the Manhattan Metropolitan Correctional Center. Failures that might have provided just that.
The night before he died was just this cascade of protocol breaches. I mean, remember, after a previous potential suicide attempt, Epstein was supposed to be under really close watch, but his cellmate was transferred out, leaving him all alone, and nobody ever brought in a replacement. This was just the first in a whole series of failures that maybe made the impossible, well, possible.
And the breakdown in protocol was just stunning. The guards were required to check on Epstein every 30 minutes. That was the rule, but for hours, there were no checks at all. Surveillance footage actually showed the two guards sleeping and browsing the internet, and then they falsified records to cover their tracks. Now, to be fair, one guard was on his 5th straight day of overtime, so exhaustion was definitely a factor. But theorists ask a much darker question. Were they just tired, or were they paid off?
And if the human error wasn't bad enough, get this, the technology failed too. The two cameras pointed right outside Epstein's cell. Both malfunctioned that night. Which means the one piece of footage that could have shown us exactly what happened, it just doesn't exist. Add to that another DVR malfunction just a few days earlier, and the whole situation starts to look less like a crazy coincidence and more like, well, like it was coordinated.
Okay, so you've got a questionable body and a complete security breakdown. But the next set of questions comes from inside the cell itself, where the physical evidence seems to directly contradict the official story of a suicide by hanging.
And this is where Dr. Michael Baden comes in. Now, this guy is a famed forensic pathologist, and he was hired by Epstein's own brother to observe the autopsy. His conclusion was an absolute bombshell. Based on the neck injuries and other forensic evidence, he stated very publicly that the findings were more consistent with homicidal strangulation than with hanging. I mean, that is a powerful statement from a leading expert in the field.
So the official report says Epstein, a man who was nearly 6 feet tall, weighing 185 pounds, hanged himself from his lower bunk bed. I mean, just picture that for a second. That immediately raised a very simple physical question. Is that even possible? And how could an act that violent leave the rest of the scene so undisturbed?
And when you look at the photos from inside the cell, the story just gets weirder. Notice the bottles of medicine and other things just standing perfectly upright on the very bunk he supposedly hanged himself from. He also had a sleep apnea machine with this long power cord, a much more effective tool for hanging, which was just ignored. And maybe the most bizarre detail of all, of the 2 nooses that were found, records show the one with neat, folded edges, not the frayed one, was the one taken in as evidence. It just doesn't add up.
So all of these inconsistencies led theorists to an even bolder conclusion. Maybe this wasn't a suicide, and maybe it wasn't a murder. Maybe it was a meticulously planned escape. And Epstein's state of mind leading up to his death is presented as key evidence for this.
You know, Epstein's own mindset seemed to totally contradict the idea that he was suicidal. His lawyers, who met with him the day before he died, described him as upbeat and totally focused on his upcoming bail appeal. He also left a note behind, but it wasn't a suicide note. It was a complaint about the prison conditions, burnt food, bugs in his cell, a guard who locked him in a shower. I mean, this sounds like a man fighting for better conditions, not someone who's ready to end his life.
But other notes found just scribbled on a yellow pad were even more cryptic. They were messy, full of random words, but one phrase really stood out: jail out equals 10. Theorists immediately seized on this, arguing the 10 was a clear reference to August 10th, the day of his supposed death, and that this was proof of a planned extraction.
And another phrase found in those notes was red notice. Now, just so we're all on the same page, an Interpol red notice is basically an international alert to locate and arrest a wanted fugitive. So for theorists, finding this in his private notes, right alongside names and mentions of jets and visas, well, it paints a pretty clear picture of a man who was planning a life on the run.
And ever since his death, this escape theory has just been fueled by a whole series of alleged sightings. There was a video that claimed to show him on his ranch in New Mexico. AI-generated images popped up showing him walking in Tel Aviv. There was even a rumor that he was playing Fortnite under the username LittlestJeff1. Now, all of these have been thoroughly debunked, but for the believers, they're just noise, distracting from the core possibility that he is, in fact, still out there somewhere.
So when you put it all together, the pillars of this theory become crystal clear. You've got questions about the body itself, from the facial features to that missing tattoo. You have the perfect opportunity, created by sleeping guards and broken cameras. The forensic scene itself seems to contradict the official story, with an expert pathologist even suggesting murder. And finally, you have Epstein's own state of mind, a man who seemed to be planning for his future, not for his death.
So in the end, we're left with 2 completely competing stories. One is a tale of suicide, helped along by total incompetence and systemic failure, and the other is a grand conspiracy involving a body double, a prison escape, and a cover-up at the highest levels. And with so many convenient failures and so many unanswered questions, it really leaves us all to wonder, will we ever really know what happened to Jeffrey Epstein?